to the Justin Kinner Show, right here on ESPN Dayton, 1410 Wing AM.
937-518-1410. That's the number that you can call or text to jump in on the conversation. We'll get back to your calls coming up here around the corner. Again, I'm Justin Kinner. It is the Justin Kinner Show, 1410 Dayton's ESPN Radio. All right, let's move on. Talking college basketball. We didn't get a chance to catch up with them last week since I was off all week, but we're back off and rolling here on a Tuesday. Paul Frischner from the Rebound Rundown giving us some time here today. Mr. Paul, welcome, sir. Happy Tuesday.
Yeah, happy Tuesday. Great to see you, Justin. How you doing? Doing all right? Week off? Got some time to recharge?
Oh, yeah. Not too bad. I mean, like we were talking before, I'm like, man, when you take a week off, you have to catch up on a lot of stuff. It feels like a Thursday already. And that's depressing because tomorrow's definitely not Friday.
That's right.
But hey, let's do this because, I've sensed, when we do talk Dayton a lot, it's been a lot of negativity because Dayton started out 5-0 in A10 play. That's right around the time me and you started doing these weekly hits. And then they plummeted. I mean, they just started collapsing, and it wasn't really a whole lot of positive to talk about when it came to the Flyers. They had won 5 straight in A10 play. Then they followed that up with 4 straight losses. But they're 4-1 in their last 5. They've won 3 straight, and they have a huge one tonight at home as they welcome in St. Louis. St. Louis, who just beat them a few weeks ago, Paul, 102-71. Feels like a much different Flyer team as we sit here at the tail end of February.
Yeah, it's a way different Flyer team. And it's funny because I'm glad you mentioned that. It's like we always close out these segments, and I keep saying, I wish I could talk a little more positively about Dayton. I need them to give me something. I want to talk positively about the team, but it's just there was a bad stretch there in January, and they had played themselves out of at-large contention. It just is what it is. That's the reality of the situation. But now all of a sudden you've won 3 in a row, you've won 4 of your last 5 games, and you have your most difficult game remaining in the regular season tonight against St. Louis. And St. Louis is a team that only has 2 losses on the year. They're the class of the A10 this season. But if you look back at that game that they played against each other in St. Louis on that Friday night in January on the 30th, St. Louis shot the daylights out of the ball that night. And they are one of the best 3-point shooting teams in the country. As they started the day today, they were number 2 in the country behind Yale. They are an elite 3-point shooting team. But I think they made 16 threes in that game against Dayton, if I'm not mistaken. 16 threes is hard to replicate, especially when you're on the road, especially when you're at a place like Dayton where it's tough to play. So when you're looking at a situation like Dayton's tonight, you've won 3 in a row. You've got some momentum. The fan base is starting to get a little bit more energized than they were during that 3-week stretch there in January. So if I'm Dayton and you can hold St. Louis, they hit 15 threes in that game. They were 15 for 23. But 65% from 3 is really tough to beat no matter who you're playing.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about this before as well. St. Louis, top 25 team in the country. It's one of the best seasons that they've had in forever. And you have a team that is usually dominating the A10 in Dayton. And this isn't the most talented Dayton team that they've had in recent seasons. So they're vulnerable. They're always going out and getting the team's best shots around the A10, but they're just not as talented as years past to be able to handle getting everyone's best shot. They've been caught vulnerable on some nights, as you've seen, but for Anthony Grant, for as bad as this season has gone, which is crazy because I'm looking at this, I'm like, they could still finish 20-win season, top 4 in the A10, in a great November, December. Like, it's still been a great season, but again, people just expect more. But they have St. Louis tonight, at George Washington, at Richmond, and then they can close it out against VCU on March 6th. Only 4 games remaining, including tonight. They've been getting every team's best shot, but at some point they have to give their best shot, and we've started to see that as of late.
Yeah, no doubt. And you look back at that game against George Mason, what was that, a week or 2 ago? I think it was last week they played at George Mason. That was, in my opinion at least, Justin, you could probably argue the Florida State game in the non-conference, but at least in conference play, and if not in the whole season, at that Florida State game, I was there, was pretty impressive. But I thought that George Mason game was maybe their best game of the season, especially with how they had been playing lately. Amal Atong is playing so much better. You're getting consistent double-figure scoring nights out of him. He has 21 against George Mason. He had 17 the other night against Duquesne, 17 and 10, right? He's got a double-double. So you're getting contributions, obviously, from Javon Bennett and how well he has played lately. So I think that what you're seeing here, from Bennett, who had 22 against George Mason, and the rest of this crew, you're starting to see them trending in the right direction. You get that double bye, you get into the A10 tournament. Look, I don't need to repeat it. Everybody listening to this knows what's happened to Dayton in the A10 tournament over the last couple of decades. But hey, at some point, you got to snap that streak. At some point, you got to get over the hump and do it. And maybe this is the year for Dayton that you peak at the right time down towards the end.
Yeah, Mark Adams, who works for ESPN and he's called games for them for decades. He even, said that you think about Dayton, they've become the hunted for so long. And although they are still viewed as the hunted by a lot of teams, they're now the hunter. This isn't the most talented team. They're having to fight and scrap and claw. Getting hot right now, the at-large opportunity, it's done. They've thrown that out the window. It really is about winning the conference tournament. And you could say, well, that doesn't start for another couple of weeks. Technically, it starts now. You want to be the hottest team heading into the tournament. Obviously, you want a top 4 seed. You would love to win the regular season title, which means something, I guess. But it's all about playing your best basketball heading into that. And the only chance they have to end that, multi-decade drought, as you talked about when it comes to the A10 tournament, is playing good basketball. I think every team will fear Dayton, especially if they find a way to beat St. Louis tonight, win out the regular season over the last 3, which they are more than capable of. That would be a scary team heading into the A10 tournament. But this is a big game tonight because of that right there. It's a tone setter. It's just letting everyone know in the league that, hey, we hit a little bit of a speed bump, but we're back, and it starts tonight against St. Louis.
Yeah, I think it absolutely does. If you come out at home tonight and you lay an egg against, like I said, the best team in the league, that's really tough to rebound from over the last week and a half of the regular season going into the conference tournament. But if you come out and you punch St. Louis in the mouth tonight and you win that game in front of your own fans who are trying so desperately to get back into this, right? The Dayton fans want so much for this to work out. There's been so much chatter about Anthony Grant. There's been so much chatter about the student turnout at the games, and the fans are eating each other alive on social media. And it's just been a brutal scene the last couple of weeks. And how do you rectify that? At the end of the day, no matter where you are, no matter what team you're playing for, at whatever program, winning cures all. And if you start to win games, all of those types of things start to figure themselves out. And tonight against St. Louis is a chance to really make a statement and show that, yeah, you won 3 games in a row, but those results weren't fake. You have a chance to do it against the best team in the league.
Yeah, you talked about the fans eating themselves alive. You seem like a much more mature individual. You're younger than me. You seem way more mature. You're going to be a way better adult than I am, mainly because I love the chaos. I sit there and scroll like a child, and I just laugh. And some of the things, and I think we've all seen some weird stuff on the Dayton social media side with the fans kind of going at each other. This is the most chaotic I've ever seen this fan base, and I would be lying if I said I haven't slightly enjoyed it. I've been very entertained by it. But winning cures all, and Dayton has a chance to keep that going. Speaking of a team that, winning cures all, very similar to Dayton. Everyone criticizing the coach, the team not living up to expectations, everyone talking about, next season already because of how poorly it's gone at stretches. Well, now all of a sudden 15-12, 8th in the Big 12, which isn't great, but they've won 4 straight, including the most recent for the Bearcats we're talking about here. A win at Kansas, a top 10 win, 84-68 the final. They're at Texas Tech coming up later on tonight. How about Cincinnati getting hot at the right time? Very similar to what we're talking about with Dayton. Cincinnati may have to get hot and go on a conference tournament run to get back into the conversation. What'd you make of Cincinnati's recent run, including that win over Kansas?
Well, they're doing it so much differently. They're doing what we thought they were going to do going into the season, where you're playing through the post. You pay all this money to get Mustafa Chum and Baba Miller. And Baba Miller, the athleticism that he shows, he's one of the most athletic, versatile players that Cincinnati has had in a long time. He's tall, he can score, he can defend. He is such a talented player. And then you combine that with Mustafa Cham, who goes for 20 plus the other day against Kansas. You're playing through these post guys, which is way different than having to settle for some tough perimeter shots. We know that they're a good defensive team, but they've just been terrible offensively this year. Well, you lose to West Virginia a couple of weeks ago at home, and Wes Miller kind of had a crash out after the game, was very emotional, kind of sounded like he was brought to tears on the post-game radio show. And to be quite honest, Justin, I don't blame him. I felt bad for the guy because you could tell how much this season and really his career, his tenure at Cincinnati had taken out of him, that he so desperately wanted this to work out. And I think it clicked in that moment that it wasn't working out and that something needed to change. And I had even commented on my show, I think the next morning, I said, with how emotional Wes was after that game, maybe it's just best for both sides if they go their own separate ways. Everybody knew West was going to be fired at the end of the season. They were just going to have to wait 2 weeks to do it because of the buyout. But why not just do it now and let an interim finish out the regular season? You rip off the Band-Aid and it is what it is. Well, you know what? I don't know if I was expecting them to do it, but I thought maybe in the back of my head there was a chance it could happen with how low they were in that very moment. I thought it probably won't happen, but I'm not going to 100% say it won't. And for Cincinnati, thank God it didn't, because they're now in their last 4 games, they look like an entirely different team. Their offense looked as good as it has all year. And look, they're going to have to finish the season on an 8-game winning streak, the regular season, I mean, because that would put them at 19-12 on the season. I believe it would put them at 11-7 in conference play. And at that point, if you're 19-12 and 11-7 going into the Big 12 tournament, at that point, you would have wins at Kansas, at Texas Tech, and home against BYU. 3 games in a 5-game stretch, you would rattle off those wins. That's tough to ignore. What's also tough to ignore is that you lost to Eastern Michigan and you lost to Xavier, but you have those wins in your back pocket. The committee has stressed that it only matters that you are winning these games. It doesn't matter when you are winning these games. It's all about the entire season. They have long since thrown out how you finished the year. But you know what I always say, Justin? At the end of the day, this is a committee of human beings. At the end of the day, we are deciding, a group of individuals sitting in the room deciding who is going to be in the NCAA tournament. And if Cincinnati wins these last 4 games and they look like an NCAA tournament team, the conference tournaments consistently have shown that they don't matter, or at least that they don't matter any more than the rest of the regular season. So I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, they got to win 2 games in Kansas City, because I don't know how much that matters. But I think 19-12 and 11-7 at least puts you maybe in the first 4 out, last 4 in conversation.
Yeah, college football, they try to convince you as well that the timing of the losses and wins don't matter. I've never believe that to be the case. In college basketball, especially right now, it's all about who's hot. And I think, top of mind awareness to get these types of wins this late in the season, you can't tell me that it has less, the equal amount of an impact winning these games here in February as it would have back in January when conference play starts. So we'll see what ultimately goes down when it's all said and done. Let's move over to the Horizon with Wright State. They've been in first place pretty much this entire run. I'd be lying if I said, that I think that they're playing great basketball. I don't think they're playing very good basketball right now. They're still finding ways to win. I know they just lost their home finale against Robert Morris. I know Coach Sargent was asked recently if he believed that they peaked, early in the conference portion of the season whenever they beat Milwaukee and beat Oakland in back-to-back games and blew them out. I haven't seen them return to looking as great as what they did early on in January. They've still won basketball games. They have a 2-game lead in the Horizon. Yes, I know it's all about winning the conference tournament, but if you're not playing good basketball heading in, who knows what can happen. But I don't think they're playing their best basketball. They have a big one on Wednesday night at Purdue Fort Wayne, and then they closed it out against their rival Northern Kentucky on Saturday. They had a chance to win it outright this past Sunday, but lost for the second time against Robert Morris.
Yeah, and how about Robert Morris, by the way, kind of coming on strong here at the end of the season. You have Oakland in there as well. I mean, this is really at the top. It's become like a 3-team race in the Horizon League between Wright State, Robert Morris, and Oakland. Now, Wright State still rates the highest on KenPom, but it's just by 1 spot. Robert Morris is 1 spot behind them, and then Oakland is two spots behind Robert Morris. So at the top of this league, Wright State still has that top spot. But I think to your point, there's a lot of young talent on this Wright State team. They have relied on some youth combined with some experience, but they relied on some youth. And college basketball in this day and age has become such a long, grueling sport because you're there forever, right? You're there in the summer. You're not at home as much as you ever used to be. You're on campus. You're doing these summer sessions, and you get into the season. It can wear on that. And that's why you see a lot of these programs that are successful, they're winning with talent and experience because they're older guys who are used to the grind and know what's going on. I kind of look at this with Wright State, and I think it was a valid question to ask. Did you peak too early, I guess? And I still think, there's a reason that they're rated the highest in the league. But, to drop a game to Detroit or to drop that game back in January to Cleveland State when in that point you were 7-1 in the conference season, I definitely do have some concerns about Wright State. I think there are reasons, like, TJ Birch being a sophomore, Michael Cooper being a freshman, and I know Cooper led him in scoring the other night against Robert Morris, but it's like, I don't want to necessarily knock these guys. It's just things that you're thinking about as the season goes on.
Yeah, I mean, people do forget about how young that roster is because, I mean, you already touched on it, but a lot of these are either second-year guys or first-year guys, and that's the core of their team. They do have Michael Marabe, who's, a senior and has been around the game for a while, but outside of that, it's a lot of youth guys. But, you would hope that the camaraderie of playing together for a couple years would help overcome some of the newer rosters around the conference. They're still have a 2-game lead. They could have a 4 or 5 game. That's how like weird the league has been, and a season for Wright State. They've lost some games that they absolutely should not. They're beating all the good teams, and they're kind of letting bad teams hang around. They could have had this conference wrapped up about a week and a half ago, and they could have had a 4 or 5 game lead in the league. And now they're holding on with the 2-game lead with 2 to go. There are still scenarios out there that they don't win this conference, and they play 2 good teams to close it out. We'll see what happens.
Yep, exactly. And so I think for Wright State, it's important here going into the last week. And look, Saturday, you're going on the road to Northern Kentucky, rivalry game. That's a way to make a statement going into the conference tournament. If you're Wright State, I know Northern Kentucky, they still have a lot to play for on their side. They're going to be at home wanting to win that game to end the regular season. Like, there's a lot at stake in that game. So yeah, it's a big week for Wright State.
The Red Hawks continue their climb. They move all the way up to number 21. They're 27-0, ranked 21st in the country. And, you look at every test that has been thrown their way. They're on national television. They're ranking. They keep moving up those. They have a target on their back, and it just seems like that's what's been fueling them the rest of the way. They have 4 left. They're at Eastern Michigan tonight. They have Western Michigan coming up later on in the week. And then they'll have Toledo at home, and they'll close it out at Ohio on March 6th. They have 4 to go. How do you see this shaking out? Is there a loss? Is there a danger? Is there a roadblock on the remainder of this schedule that has you concerned about getting in the way of them finishing the regular season undefeated?
Well, it's funny, Justin, because I've been talking all season about like a Tuesday night in Ypsilanti and what if things go wrong on a Tuesday night in Ypsilanti, not even realizing, like I was just saying that tongue in cheek, not even realizing that they actually do play on a Tuesday night in Ypsilanti. Tonight doesn't concern me as much as it might have earlier in the year when I was joking about that, because I think they just play at such vastly different styles. And also Miami is playing much better basketball than they were 3 weeks ago. And it's funny because usually when a team hits a lull, like we were just talking about Wright State, right? When a team hits a lull, they lose 2 out of 3 or they lose 3 out of 5. Well, Miami's lull this year was that they went to overtime a couple of times and they won a couple of 1-possession games that, oh, by the way, got them all this national attention because their games were nail biters and thrillers and people loved watching them, but they still won every game. Their lull resulted unanimously in wins. And so for Miami to now be trending back up in the right direction where their defense is playing better, their offense is shooting the ball a whole lot more. And that was really what was letting them down there at the end of January, was they weren't shooting the 3-ball well. That's come back. So, tonight against Eastern Michigan, sure, Eastern Michigan had played Akron close a couple of weeks ago. They also got blown out by Akron. I don't think Eastern Michigan's a total pushover, but that's one to keep an eye on tonight. It's also a long road trip. They are on the road this entire week. They're not coming back home. So they're gone the whole week, right? So going to Western Michigan, it's at the end of a long week. That's something to keep an eye on. Toledo, they're feisty next week, but then the other one, and we can talk about this more next week, Justin, but that Ohio game in the last game of the regular season, Ohio has not lost to Miami at home since 2011. It's been a long time since Miami has won the Battle of the Bricks in Athens. So, that there are things that Miami's going to have to accomplish here down the last 2 weeks, but they're going to be favored by 5 or 6 at least in all 4 of them.
What do you make about, the wins above the bubble? Like, there's some metrics that are now being thrown out to kind of really help prop up Miami, or at least save them if they do have a crash being, oh my gosh, their first loss in the month, the entire season in the month of February or early March. Is this still, again, there's still a lot of basketball left to be played, or at least there is, but there isn't at the same time, if you really think about it. Where are you at with, if they lost one of their final four here, how confident are you that this team is still an NCAA tournament team without having to win their conference tournament? And I'm sure you get asked that a lot. I think everyone's asking that question when it comes to this, because it seems like every other day there's some metric that supports it, and there's another metric that makes you a little bit concerned. Everyone has varying opinions on this. Where are you with Miami? If they do suffer one loss in their final four here, regardless of what happens in the conference tournament, are you feeling more confident that this is an at-large team as the days go by?
Yeah, I do. I think one loss in the regular. I think they can go into Selection Sunday with 2 losses. Because if they go into Selection Sunday with 1 loss in the regular season and 1 loss in the conference tournament, I think they're in. I think if you ask one loss, like if they were to lose in the MAC tournament title game and that's their first loss, if they get to the MAC tournament title game undefeated, they are for sure in. If they get to the MAC tournament undefeated, they are in. There is zero doubt in my mind at all that if Miami wins their last 4 games, they will not be kept out after going 31-0 in the regular season. It will not happen. It will not happen. They will not be left out. I don't care, because you got to think about, even if they were to lose, like let's say they got upset at noon in Cleveland on Thursday, they would still be losing to the 8th place team in the MAC, because it's only the top 8 teams in the MAC that go to Cleveland. So it's not like they're losing to Northern Illinois or one of the worst teams in the MAC there at the bottom. They're losing to, Buffalo's not a great team necessarily nationally, but at least they're not getting upset in like the 1 seed against the last seed in the conference. Again, I think they're in with 1 loss or less going into the NCAA tournament. Obviously, with no losses, they'd be in as an auto bid. But I think 1 loss in the regular season, they're in. It gets a little more. I can't believe I'm saying this. It does get a little more dicey, but I still think with 2 losses or less overall, they're in. They're absolutely in.
And then at that point, you got to question: does the MAC start rooting against them in the horizon or in the MAC tournament?
Oh yeah. Can you imagine a 2-bid MAC, Justin?
Yeah, a bid stealer. I mean, there could very well easily. I mean, Miami losing in the conference tournament, quarterfinals, semifinals. I mean, that's great for the MAC. And the MAC, they won't ever say it, but deep down the MAC's like, they seem pretty safe at this point. I really wouldn't mind Miami being bumped. You get your auto qualifier and your at-large bid. That'd be something if the MAC.
And you think about it from the other perspective too, that like let's say Miami was to lose in the conference tournament championship game, they're probably going to get sent to Dayton, which would be like a pseudo home game for Miami. You think back to Xavier last year playing Texas and what that environment was like. I mean, could you imagine if Miami can't play in Dayton if they win the MAC tournament, but could you imagine if they did drop a game and ended up in Dayton in the play-in game, which is probably where they would end up? Maybe I can't imagine, because they could get to a 10 seed, I think, if they completely go undefeated, but I don't think they would end up, because I think that 1 loss would hold them back from that 10 line. I think the 10 line is the bottom of the 10 line is probably their peak. So they lose a game, they end up in Dayton. Imagine the crowd.
So, yeah, I mean, Wright State played the first 4 years ago. Now, that was different. That was a 16. We're talking about the 11 matchup, 11-11 here. It was UD Arena. There's the powers that be at Dayton that will never let Wright State and Dayton go head-to-head, but they couldn't stop Wright State from coming to play at UD Arena in the first 4, and Wright State had 13,000 fans basically screaming for them the entire time. It was electric. I can't imagine what the crowd for Miami would be in that situation. There are still people, by the way, like Miami playing in the first 4. I would love that. I don't have a problem with it. I didn't have a problem when Wright State played in it. There were a lot of Wright State fans that were offended by being put in the first 4. I'm like, everyone I talked to at Wright State said they loved it. You have an opportunity to win an NCAA tournament game as a 16. You're not going to get, beaten up by the 1 seed. You have a chance to get a win before you go do that. And I've seen Miami fans already saying that would be disrespectful if they got put in the play-in games at UD Arena. I don't know where that mindset comes from. The first 4 is not what it initially was, 10 years ago when that, and 12, 13 years ago. I have no problem if they're in the first 4. I don't get where fans come across finding that to be disrespectful. Miami fans should love it if they're at Dayton. It's a close trip. It's a there and back. You wouldn't have any problem with it.
No, I think just being in the NCAA tournament at all is such an exceptional accomplishment for this team that no matter where they go, what they get sent to San Diego in the first round. I mean, it doesn't matter where they play. It will be awesome for this program. And I would much rather see them go to Dayton than get assigned to San Diego, right? I mean, you'd much rather play in front of your home fans. But But yeah, I think, and that's the other argument too. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's the other argument about, playing in the playing game. A lot of people will say it should be the last, the last however many at-large teams, and Dayton should be the last 8 at-large teams, and then the conference tournament champions, the 16 seeds, should just automatically get into the tournament. You talk to a lot of them, they want to win a game. Like, yes. I don't think the 16 seeds are, I don't want to speak for every one of them, because I'm sure there are coaches that would rather just play on Thursday or Friday and maybe have an extra day of prep or whatever, to try and beat that 1 seed. But I think if you talk to a lot of 16 seed programs, they would say they love going to Dayton because they get their opportunity to win a game in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, if you're a 16 going up against a 1, you get a couple extra days to enjoy the build-up to your NCAA tournament appearance. But you're done. Your season's done. Wright State, when they were in it years ago, I mean, I talked to many people at Wright State that said, hey, they don't, I mean, it's unique for Wright State because you're playing at UD Arena. It's basically a home game. So there was that element to it. But they won. That counted as their first NCAA tournament win in program history. It counted as Scott Nagy, who was the head coach at the time, that counted as his first NCAA tournament win. Yeah, and so you got all of the vibes that come with winning an NCAA tournament game, then getting on the plane and heading to play another NCAA tournament game. I have no clue why any 16 seeds would be against it. And by the way, I do think you're a 16 versus 16. There's no other NCAA tournament games going on at that time. You're it. 16 versus 16. Everyone is, they're itching for that tournament game. They're watching you. All eyes are on you as a standalone game versus 1 versus 16. Nobody's watching that. All the other tournament games that are around it, no one's really paying attention to the 1-16 matchup unless, it's a upset alert in the under 8 minutes. But yeah, I've never understood the criticisms of playing in the first 4. I've always been a fan of it.
Yep, I agree. Fully agree.
All right, well, good stuff. Again, Paul Frischner, Rebound Rundown, awesome enough to give us some time after not getting to catch up with him last week. Last thing, what'd you make of Miami's AD coming out and letting it be known that a contract extension has already been offered? Mark Adams, who I spoke to last week with ESPN, he kind of wasn't a fan of that. He wasn't a fan of the athletic director kind of putting that out there. What do you make of that? What kind of politics was that? Was that just to cover his own behind if they lose Steele? I mean, where are you at with why the athletic director would do that at this time?
Yeah, it could be. I did think it was interesting timing, right? That there's so much going on trying to finish the season undefeated. And then that's another question that you have to answer right in the post-game press conference. Hey, you got offered a contract. But look, I mean, from David Saylor's perspective, who's the athletic director at Miami, there's obviously been so much talk of the jobs that are going to open. And I said this, I tweeted this I quote tweeted Rothstein's report of this, that, you think, and they might not all open, but you think of all of the rumors of jobs that are around here. You think of Ohio State. I don't know if they're going to get rid of Diebler, but there's been chatter, right? If they don't make the tournament, Diebler right there. Dayton, will Anthony Grant retire? Could Wes Miller get fired? Now, I don't think Cincinnati would hire the former Xavier coach, but is Cincinnati going to move on from Wes Miller here at the end of the season? Could Thad Matta be done at Butler? Travis Steele's a Butler grad. Like, the one thing I will say is, if you are a Miami fan and you're worried about Travis leaving and you get through this offseason and he is your head coach next year, you have to be feeling really good about yourself. But also, a ton of local jobs could open to where he might get poached. And so if you're David Saylor, you want to say, hey, look, we came out, we said we offered him an extension, we did everything we could to try and keep him here, but in the end, we couldn't keep him here. Or he signs the extension and they do stay. And that's how it works out. So, I did think it was interesting timing to do that with 5 games left in the regular season. But, he's trying his best to keep Travis here. I'll say that.
All right. Well, good stuff. Again, Paul Frischner, Rebound Rundown. It's the Justin Kinner Show, Dayton's ESPN Radio, 1410 Wing AM. Paul will join us next week. But Dayton in action tonight, Wright State tomorrow.
I'll be there. Are you going to be there tonight?
What's that?
Dayton, are you going to the game?
I will not be there tonight. No, okay. I will not be there tonight. Big one against St. Louis. By the way, I did see bracketology. Joe Lenardi had 11-6, had Miami and St. Louis. I thought that was interesting. Keep them away. Let them.
No. If the committee puts Miami and St. Louis against each other, they should be tried for war crimes.
I mean, Lenardi He's responsible for the first.
They're gonna
first
do
spot.
it too. It's what stinks.
Yeah. Yep. Keep them separate. Those are two teams.
They shouldn't even be in the same region.
Yeah. Man. But Paul, you the man. Appreciate you. We'll talk next week.
Thanks, Justin.
All right. Good stuff. The Justin Kinner Show right here on 1410 ESPN Radio. We'll be right back.